Hey there, welcome to this video in which we're going to take a look at the new experimental cubic renderer in Voxel Plugin 2. At the time of recording, this feature is available on the dev branch of Voxel Plugin 2, which any existing Voxel Plugin customer will have access to. But as mentioned, this is still experimental, it's subject to change, it doesn't support all features, and we don't know if it will into the future. With that said, we'll just have a quick look. This video is unscripted, it's just meant to be a brief overview of how the system works and what the different elements and assets do and how you can make use of it. This project will be available either in the Discord server as example content, or at the very least some links will be in the description for the different assets used, because this texture pack that we're using is licensed as CC BY, so you are able to use this for your own projects as well. With all that out of the way, let's go have a look around. So this is a very typical Minecraft style terrain. As per usual Voxel plugin workflows, we have these individual stamps that we can move around, which impact the world and determine how things are generated. We have volume stamps like the sphere and the mesh stamp. We have height maps, which again we can move around. This one's a bit slower just because it's really chunky. And as always, we are able to remove from the terrain, so we can do caves, and we have support for lumen with hardware ray tracing so that we have satisfying dark caves. One thing to note is we don't currently support software lumen, so distance fields and surface cache are not supported, so if you will not use hardware ray tracing, then lumen will just not work properly on the cubic mesher. The way you start using this is pretty straightforward. On your voxel world, you need to enable cubic rendering, experimental. This will disable a couple of settings, or rather take control of a couple of settings, so it will force disable nanite. It will force the max LOD to 0, as cubic LODs are not supported. Navigation mesh generation is not supported. Tessellation doesn't work because nanite is disabled. Those are the big ones. Oh yeah, and quality exponent. Usually this gives you control over the LODs. In this case, that doesn't work because we don't have LODs on the cubic terrain. So this is forced to 0.01. Instead, in order to control your viewing distance, you will want to set the quality, and you'll want to set this higher than you would usually set it on a smooth terrain. As you can see, we can push the render distance pretty far. It does take a little bit longer to generate, but in this particular case, we're looking at a terrain that is probably from side to side 2 kilometers across, or maybe a little bit less, 1.5 kilometers across. So we're looking at pretty sizable terrains, and we're able to make really large edits very fast using our usual graph workflows. Now, the base terrain in this case is a height graph, so it's just an advanced noise with a little bit of math for the terracing, so that we have these little bits where we can see how the materials behave on steeper sections. But it's really quite simple. And then when it comes to the actual configuration of the cubic renderer, in the mega material, we have a new cubic surfaces section. When the cubic mesher is enabled on your voxel world, it will look for a cubic texture template, and then you have cubic surface types, which are a special kind of surface type specific for setting up cubic surfaces. And the template is effectively where you say, this is what every single one of my cubic surfaces is going to have. It's going to, in this case, have a top diffuse, it is going to have a side diffuse, and it's going to have a color multiplier vector parameter. And then it has a material assigned inside it. If we open that material, we can see here, we're doing effectively kind of standard triplanar kind of math. So we're sampling the side texture and top texture, we're blending between the two, and this is just coordinate math. Then we have our color multiplier. We multiply that by the diffuses, and then a little bit of math to give us some specular and roughness variation. But this just feeds into the base color, and that is it. So it's really a very straightforward, just triplanar setup with a color multiplier. And you'll notice that these texture slots and vector slots are the same name as the parameters we have in here. Now, at the end of the day, we can make cubic surface type assets, and those take a template which in this case is this thing, which points back to the material. And then we will see those slots appear over here as well. And so now if we look in here, if I were to take the dirt and switch it to, you know, the dispenser front texture, and that's the top texture, and we don't have top facing dirt anywhere, so that's not very helpful. Now we immediately have the side diffuse updating. So it compiles all of these into the backend and automatically passes any parameters you set here on the surface type into the material. So we have support for texture slots, but as you saw maybe, we also have vector slots and scalar slots. And that is for scalar parameters and vector 4 parameters. So in this case, we can also set a color multiplier. And so this automatically gets passed through to this in the material. On the back end, this is replaced with textures so that we can use a single material for the entire terrain. So there's a little bit of hackery going on there. But for the user-facing perspective, all you need to know is set up your parameters here as you would a regular material. Set up your material as if you're just setting up a regular material with texture parameters, and it will automatically convert it to a texture array setup and assign all of these as needed based on your layers. And so when we look at how we are assigning the materials in the graph, we're using a smart surface type. And in that smart surface type, we're using select nodes to just assign our different grass, dirt, and stone types based on how deep inside of the terrain we are. We'll go further into that particular topic maybe in another video, because it also applies to smooth terrains actually, and it'll be bundled in wherever I end up sharing this. So I would recommend having a look at the actual project for reference on that. But really it's quite straightforward to set up from that perspective. So now if we wanted to, for instance, have a brightness multiplier, we would just go into the cubic material. So we have our cubic base here. And then we have a brightness multiplier. And we'll default that to 1. And now if we go to our dirt, you'll see that we don't have it yet, because before it shows up here, we need to go into the template and set up a scalar slot here. And so here, again, we go brightness multiplier, and we'll set the default to 1, and we save. And we might need to refresh things manually for this to actually update. Although also maybe not actually, it's just that everything is set to a dark value to 1 by default, so we don't notice it. So now you'll see that we can multiply our dirt by 1, and that scalar parameter just gets automatically passed in. So anytime you want to add new settings and new configurability to your material, you just set it up like you would a regular material. You make sure that your parameter is also configured in the template, and then your other cubic surface type assets will automatically get those settings, and you can assign them from there. So that's really all there's to it. From there, so we have those two, we have the smart surface type for the height materials to let us assign grass at the top block and then dirt 1 block down, which we currently have the dispenser texture on, and then stone underneath that. We also have a similar thing on the distance stamps, but that is a different setup actually. So let me just quickly set this back to dirt, and then we'll have a look at that. Because what's cool about this as it is set up right now is if we take a sphere and we remove here, you can see that as we dig into the surface, the materials kind of stay where they're supposed to be. And what this means is you can do edits as a player, and the materials will stay exactly where they are. And you can use procedural rules saying on slopes, I want a particular material, on deeper down, I want different materials, etc. And so in this case, this is defined. If we go click the canyon rock, we have a procedural, a smart surface type here. If we open the graph for that, effectively, we are querying the distance on a layer before we apply the edits. So this is assigned on post material layer, which comes after the default volume layer. And then we basically just have a look, are we deep in the original surface? Because if the distance returns like -500, that means we are 5 meters inside the surface, which means we should probably be stone. And so there's a bunch of layers of that kind of logic. Again, I'll share this somewhere else, and then we can look into that further there. But this is really powerful when it comes to authoring procedural worlds or semi-procedural worlds that your player can then edit while keeping the materials in place. I feel like this was a very messy video, but I hope it kind of gets the point across. This system uses all of the same distance field systems that the regular smooth terrains use, so there's no special workflows or limitations to how you author your procedural or non-procedural terrain using stamps or sculpting tools. So also if we do want to sculpt, we can just do that. You'll see that we can actually just edit this. Now this is of course a little bit weird because we are editing a blocky terrain, but the tools aren't blocky. They don't snap to the grid, so we can place a cube, but that doesn't really line up with where our cube was. So this is a little bit weird. Also, I probably need to set this to that. So this isn't perfect, but hopefully it lets you do the things you need to do, particularly for runtime player interactions, where you can just say, I want to put a cube in this particular grid snapped spot, and then it should work well enough. But yeah, it uses all the same authoring pipelines as our non-cubic workflow, which means everything in terms of graphs and that kind of thing does just work. So again, this is a height graph, and you can change your settings on this, and that drives your procedural generation. Yeah, I hope it was interesting and useful. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or join the Discord and ask there. There's other community members that have super helpful input and do really cool things, and we from the team hang out there as well. Link to that will be in the description. Documentation on all of this is going to not be coming in the super near future. What's worth noting right now is this does not support any sort of physics along the lines of, like gravel falling out of the sky and that kind of thing. And we do not currently have a solution in the plugin for scattering foliage on top of this. So if you wanted to render grass or similar, that might prove a little bit tricky because the regular voxel samplers will work, but they will place things on the mesh as if it were a smooth terrain. So that is a problem we still need to solve, and I don't know when we'll have the time to do that. Other than that, most systems should just work, queries should work as they always have, runtime edits should work, stamps just do their usual thing, procedural generation should just work. Yeah, so if you have any questions, as I said, here in the comments or on Discord, and let us know how things go, what you end up doing with this. Oh yeah, one further thing I should mention is arbitrary meshes. So like rendering roofs or ladders or something like that, like you would in regular Minecraft, you will have to handle yourself. That is outside of the scope of Voxel Plugin. We are just doing the cubic renderer for lots and lots of stuff. If you want to have other block types that can't just be represented as a cube, that's going to have to be a separate thing. And also at this point in time, this pipeline does not have support for masked or translucent textures, and doing so would likely be quite tricky, so this is not something I expect us to do in the near future. Nonetheless, I hope that this is useful and interesting, and I hope you have lots of fun with this. I hope you have a lovely day, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!